Hey, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, and today I finally want to talk about Marvel's Avengers. This is a game that I first had a chance to see a demonstration for at E3 earlier this year, and I was actually going to make a video on this recently, talking about my initial impressions of it based on, the stuff that I saw, because up until this point, people hadn't really seen any gameplay, and they weren't really sure what to expect from it, so I was trying to sort of paint a slightly better picture. But then I found out that it was going to be playable at Gamescom, so I was like, well, I might as well wait, go hands-on with it, and then give you a more accurate representation of how the game feels to play, everything like that, and just kind of tell you more about it. So that's what we're doing today, because honestly, I'm so glad I did wait, because having gone hands-on with it, the game actually feels really, really fun. Now, I appreciate if you guys cast your mind back to E3, following the announcement, following the reveal, there were some aspects of the game that looked cool, but there were also some aspects that people were not too keen on, not too sure on, and basically it just kind of left people in this weird void where they're like, well, I'd heard these rumours about this game kind of before it was actually revealed, like, talking about what it could be, and then following the E3 presentation, people were just like, well, I don't really know what it is. So, today, I want to talk about that, because if you guys have seen the gameplay from Gamescom, Square Enix officially released a complete playthrough of the tutorial mission, and that kind of gives you a better picture as to how it runs in action. However, it's also important to note that it's kind of a weird thing to show off, because that is specifically the tutorial mission, and it's very linear. So if you watch just that, you're like, alright, so it's kind of a on-rails action game with heroes, and that sounds kind of cool, but what else do I do? When in actuality, it's a much broader, more open game. Not an open world game, but there are expansive open areas that you could explore. There's loot to earn, there's characters to build, there's progression. There's a lot of things that you would kind of find in games like loot-driven games like Destiny or Division or things like that. And that stuff just isn't presented in the initial gameplay. So you'd be forgiven for kind of watching that and thinking it's a completely different game to what it actually is. So let me talk about this. Let me first start by just talking about my hands-on time, because that's what I got to play, and then afterwards I had a chance to attend a presentation where they basically gave us a deep dive into how the game plays beyond that point. The loot, the progression, the customization, all that good stuff. So first things first, from what you guys would have already seen from the gameplay, we run down the bridge, it follows A-Day, there's of course this big explosion, people try and hijack the big new reactor, and things start going badly. So the initial tutorial flow will have you play through as different characters. You start off as Thor, you then go on to play Iron Man, you play Hulk, you play Black Widow, and it's really cool, right? The abilities feel great to use, the game looks great in motion. Now, I know one of people's main gripes right now are the character models, and I will admit, they still look a little bit odd. I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those weird things. When I talk to people about this, I'm like, I can't quite place what it is I don't like about the character models, but there's just something about them that just doesn't quite sit right. And some people were like, oh, maybe it's because we've been used to the MCU, so maybe we're just like, oh, that doesn't look like Tony Stark. But then, having said that, when the new Spider-Man game came around, or in the past when we've had like Batman games, people have been completely cool with those. So there's something about character models that doesn't necessarily look quite right. However, a lot of that is just completely forgotten when the game is in motion. You forget it's a third-person game. A lot of the time, your character's back is to you. And honestly, when you just start running through, when I started sort of like playing through, even when I was playing through and I had the cutscenes, I kind of started to forget that stuff. So I think it's often one of those things that when you watch a trailer, it's very much in your face. It's the only thing you can watch. You don't get to go hands-on with it, so you're like, well, this is all I have. But then when you play it, those things become less important. When I first started playing as Thor, and I'm just throwing my hammer around, kind of has that cool God of War mechanic. One of the things I said last year when playing the God of War game was that I love the way you could throw your axe and then just like position yourself behind an enemy and pull it back to you, and Thor can do the same thing with his hammer, so that's really cool. So obviously every kind of character has a light attack, they have a heavy attack, so you kind of go around and link together basic combos. You can then launch people into the air for aerial combos, you have special abilities, you have super abilities, and you then have ways you can interact with the environment as well. So you start off by fighting with Thor, and then when you've defeated all the surrounding enemies, you then get to the point where you need to break through this wall, so you charge up your ability, smash through it. It all looks very nice, okay? And I also had a chance to play it on PS4. There was, of course, PC demos running as well, but I decided to check it out on console, and it actually ran really, really nicely. So you then go through from there, and you go on to Iron Man. I will say that Iron Man section was probably my least favourite of all of them. Iron Man's a cool character, but his first section was just like, had him flying through the sky, and you're firing beams from his hand. But that kind of played like almost like a weird third-person shmup to a degree. Until you land on the ground, you get into regular combos, but that first part was a little bit odd. But anyway, you land down, start playing through as Iron Man. That was really cool. Hulk was probably my favourite. Hulk was just epic because obviously he's just this big old guy, smashes everything. He can pick up enemies, he can slam them into the ground, he can then slam them into other enemies. So he is just really, really cool and over the top. And when it comes to exploring or, venturing across the bridge, he's then able to parkour. He can jump onto things and leap off of them. So him, for a character that obviously can't fly, traversal is actually really, really good fun. And then obviously we had the battle with Black Widow. That one took a little bit of adjusting to begin with because I'd just gone from having 3 characters that were so heavily melee focused. She still has melee abilities, but for a lot of the fight you then use your guns, so you're kind of dodging back and forward, firing your pistols, rolling around again. And of course we also then got to play as Cap on the hijacked helicarrier, and that was really cool as well. He's actually got some pretty fancy moves. He's got like a really cool one where he just slams the ground, knocks everyone over, and then you can throw your shield between people. So all up, the abilities play really well. And one of the things that I said when I first heard about this game, or when it was first kind of revealed at E3, was like, having played something like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which is a really, really fun experience, especially when you play with your friends, if this ended up just being like a bigger Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 that just looked a lot better, that in itself would make for a great experience. So obviously there is co-op in the game, and there is that multiplayer aspect to it, but it is far more than that. It is, of course, a loot-driven game, and that's where I then want to go on to, because this is the part where you didn't get to see this in gameplay. This is the part that wasn't really communicated too well, and this is the part that we actually found out more about in the presentation. So once you finish the bridge section, once they've kind of set the scene, once you completed the tutorial, of course, there is the massive setback. Then you fast forward and you get to the point where this company called AIM, who have basically said that they can protect the world with robots, and then make it so that like heroes are basically outlawed and everything, and you then have to try and sort of rebuild. So you basically get this abandoned helicarrier, which you then set up as your new base, and this is basically how you start working through the campaign. So you play through the game, and there will be missions you can do. Now there is one thing that is, I'll admit, I wasn't too sure about it to begin with, and I'm still not entirely sure whether I completely like this system, but there are some missions in the game that you have to play solo. They are kind of like your core story missions, and they will lead to you know, unlocking other people or unlocking new missions, and they are things that you have to do solo. And then you have other missions, lots of other missions, that you can then do co-op. So I guess if any of you guys are Final Fantasy XIV players, you'll probably be used to this, because it's basically like playing through your personal story. You do your missions on your own, and then everything else you can do co-op. Now, to be clear, it's not going to be one of those things where it's like largely a single player game with a tiny bit of co-op. I think it's probably the other way around, where it's like there's a handful of solo missions that will tell you the Golden Line narrative, and then there's a lot of other stuff that you can do as co-op. So there's plenty of things, if you do intend to play this, multiplayer with your friends, you will of course be playing as those characters, to begin with at least. They did say that in the future they will be adding more characters, adding more regions, which will all be free, by the way, which we'll get onto in a minute, but initially you'll be focusing on the core 4, and you won't also be able to have duplicate characters, so you can't then suddenly run around as 4 Hulks. You are going to have to create the team, as it were. Now, outside of that point, when you're playing through the game and you actually get beyond the tutorial point, it opens up a lot. You go to these bigger, open, more expansive environments. You can then go around defeating enemies, completing missions, and you get a lot of loot. Now, the actual UI for the game, which you obviously wouldn't have seen in the gameplay, but the UI for the game actually shares quite a lot of similarities with Destiny. It's got that sort of circular cursor that you use your analog stick to drag over things. It's got a player card which looks very much like the Destiny player card, which has your power level on it, it has your progress on it, it has a little sort of design based on who you're playing as, and then you have your loot system. There's different loot rarities, as you would expect, going from things like uncommon, common, legendary, rare, epics, things like that, and they all have different stat bonuses on. You then have things that you can unlock on your gear. You have like perks you can unlock on your gear to make them even better, and these will obviously influence your power, and this is the stuff that you get as rewards. However, on top of that, there's a cosmetic layer which allows you to change the way that you look, and this is of course where you get a ton of really cool costumes. They basically said that they've kind of dug through 80 years of Marvel history, and they've got so many costumes for the characters. We saw some really, really cool ones, and this is the stuff that they made it very clear this will not impact power. This is purely so that you can look how you want whilst also playing the way you want. And my understanding from their kind of conversations and the way they sort of inferred this is probably where some of the microtransaction stuff will come into it, because they have no intention of selling power, and they made it very clear that in the future, any new characters and any new missions or expansions to the world or the regions will all be free, because they want to ensure that everybody can come through with this story. So that way, because they're telling a unique story, right? They're telling an original story. This is a story that they themselves have crafted, and they want to ensure that everybody can experience that. So they've promised that all characters and all regions and expansions that will basically push the story forward will always be free. But my understanding is that things like costumes, not all of them, they did say that a lot of these costumes can be unlocked in game, but my understanding is that some of those will of course be sold. Now, that's completely fine if that's just costumes. I do sincerely hope that, a game like this gets the microtransaction model right. It needs to be pro-consumer. We've seen them in the past where some of these things have not gone the right way, and it definitely needs to not do that. However, if they do just go down the cosmetic route and they sell you like, the odd costume as well as things you can earn in game, then that's going to be completely fine, assuming everything else is free. Now, of course, the other big sort of question point right now, which we still don't know the answer to, is the PlayStation exclusive angle. We do know that when there is a playable demo, PS4 will be getting it first, but outside that point, we don't know quite what they'll be doing. Some people were kind of speculating that they'll wonder whether Sony get Spider-Man, you know, because of the relationship and whatnot. I sincerely hope that doesn't happen, because of course if it does, then that's going to be a huge sort of block of the story that a lot of other people can't experience. And given that they've been very keen on trying to ensure that everybody can experience the story, I'm hoping they don't lean towards that aspect, because that would probably be a direction that would annoy quite a lot of people. So fingers crossed it doesn't go there. However, taking a step back for a minute, overall, I definitely enjoyed my time playing the game. It feels a lot of fun to play. It runs really smoothly, runs really fluidly, chains together the combos is really nice. I do wish I had a chance to check it out in co-op. They said they're going to be speaking more about co-op towards the beginning of next year. They basically got a few more beats they want to talk about at different points. I think later on this year they'll be talking a little bit more about just kind of the game as a whole, and I think towards the beginning of next year they said they will be talking about how co-op works. So that I really want to see, because this is obviously a game where up until now the only gameplay we have seen, we've experienced, and I've played, is of course a very solo-driven experience. You run through this linear story and, you know, you kind of have fun in the process, but there's not really much that shows how characters will be working together. Because one thing they did say is that when you do start doing co-op, there will be ways that characters interact with one another. If you kind of think about like the Endgame movie, I'm thinking about the ways that the, you know, different heroes fought together to go against Thanos, then yeah, if we can have stuff like that in this game, that's going to be pretty epic. I mean, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 had some really, really cool combo attacks, so if we can have that, but looking this good, then that would be cool. Now, I do say the one kind of thing that I do hope they address, keep in mind everything right now is in pre-alpha, so it's still super early. They've still got a lot of time to polish and fix and change things. So I'm kind of hoping maybe they do a pass on the character models, because I'll admit they do still look a little bit odd, but if they do end up just remaining the same, it's not going to be one of those things that stops me from playing the game. You know, they are still characters that in motion look great, and the moves are fun, and the game is fun, so if they end up looking a little bit weird, I'll still play it. But I do still hope that they fix it. Anyway, that aside, that's kind of it. Those are my initial impressions from my hands-on time. Had a lot of fun with it. Definitely excited to see more. I'll of course keep you guys posted, because as and when we do find out more about the game, as and when Square Enix talk more about it, or Crystal Dynamics talk more about it, then I'll be sure to share that with you guys. I'm really hoping at some point they share the presentation that I got to see, because if you get to see sort of like the loot system and everything else you can do for like character customization, I think that'll sort of like persuade quite a lot of people, because it actually looks really, really cool. So yeah, fingers crossed for that. As and when we find out more, I'll let you guys know. I really hope you guys enjoyed that video. Remember to hit that subscribe button and also click on the little bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next upload. Also, don't forget you can check out 269 and Paradise Central streaming over on Twitch 6 days a week. You can find a link to the multi-stream in the description box down below. Be sure to drop by and get involved. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.